10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 163. Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 163. So glad to be back and so glad that you are here with us. This is another Tune of the Month episode, listener favorites. I get a lot of comments every single month that people love these, so we are going to keep doing them, keep showing you new ideas over jazz standards to hopefully give you a better grasp on some of the most played stuff out there. So just a reminder that if you'd like to grab the PDF to this episode and all the other episodes that we have ever put out, you can sign up to become a member of our Patreon family and join the over 200 folks over there that have pledged their support every month to make sure that this podcast keeps coming at you every single week and in high quality. It only costs you $3 a month to support the show and get your hands on all those fantastic educational materials that we have over there. So if you'd like to do that, you can go over to 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, and sign up to show your support each and every month. Thank you so much to everybody who does that. It means the world to us. We are not an advertiser-supported show. Instead, we ask you directly, the listeners, the beneficiaries of this podcast, to show your support through a very, very small monthly donation. All right, let's get into today's episode. So today is going to be about a very simple idea, but one that is very difficult to execute and something that I think is going to give you a lot of trouble and lead to a lot of growth on your end. And the tune that we're going to be using as a vehicle for this week's episode is Solar. And before we jump into what the etude is all about and what I want you to think about on this tune, I wanted to go over the form of this tune because it is a very interesting form. So one of the reasons that I picked it is because it's a short form. It's only 12 measures. And the exercise that I'm going to have you do is best done over shorter tunes so that you can work in choruses. And they're not that long because what I'm going to ask you to do is very difficult. And if you get into a 32 bar tune, I think you're really going to have trouble completing this assignment. Well, let's talk about the form first. I imagine that Solar is probably a tune that a lot of you have heard before. So let's dive into the actual chord structure and explain this a little bit. So what a lot of people don't realize is that Solar is actually a modified minor blues. And it's very modified, but it still does kind of work as a minor blues. So I wanted to dive into this a little bit because this will shed a lot of light on where the changes actually come from and how to get around them. So let's start by talking about the changes a little bit. So it starts in the key of concert C minor, but this chord is very interesting because what it is a minor major 7. It sounds like this. So we play that chord for 2 measures, and then we immediately jump into a 2-5 in measure 3 that goes to the key of F major. So you get this in the first 2 measures, and then you immediately go to this sound. Then we hang out in the key of F major for a little while, 2 more measures, and then immediately that F major becomes F minor, and that becomes the 2 chord, kicking off a 2-5 that goes to E flat. So from the beginning again, we have C minor major 7, then we have our 2-5 in F. Now that becomes minor, which makes it the 2 chord of E flat. And then that chord actually becomes minor, and that becomes a 2-5 in the key of D flat. And then in the last measure, we go up and we do a minor 2-5 back to that C minor chord. and then we're back at the top and we do it all over again. So let me play that progression for you in time, because I think that my description of it kind of dropped the ball on that. The 2-5 in the key of D flat actually happens twice as fast, because if you were following along, you might say, well, we ran out of measures, and we did. But let me play it for you in time, and I want you to listen for those chords that I just explained to you. See if you can hear all of them. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so hopefully you can hear the harmonic rhythm a little bit more when I actually played it in time for you. So why do we consider it a modified minor blues? That's a question we have to ask. So it starts in the key of C minor, all right? And then it moves in bar 5 to the key of F. And that is very, very similar to a minor blues. Now, the rest of the form is very, very modified, right? As soon as it gets to that key of F, basically what it's doing is it's moving down in all whole steps. But if you look at the fact that it's 12 bars, starts in a minor key, and then kind of moves to the key of the 4, you can tell that the thing that they had in mind when they wrote it was to kind of base it off of that 12-bar minor blues with a lot of modifications. Now, you could disagree with me on that. That's totally fine. I welcome disagreement. But that's how I've always thought of it, and I think it actually provides a nice framework. All right, so what do I want you to do over this tune? The real point of this episode and what the etude is all about. I want you to try to limit yourself to playing in 1 octave for a couple of choruses over this tune, or maybe even just 1 chorus if it's really hard for you. Now, this sounds like an easy thing. Wow, you're giving me a whole octave to work in. But what you don't realize is how much you take for granted that you can play in a whole bunch of different octaves on your instrument, whatever instrument it might be. It is really difficult to play in 1 octave for an entire chorus. In fact, when I was sitting down and writing this etude, I found myself going outside of that octave and catching myself a whole bunch of times. And that was when I'm actually sitting down and thinking about what I'm going to write for you guys. So imagine doing this on the fly when you're improvising. Basically what it means is that you have to think about every little thing that you play. You cannot go on autopilot whatsoever. And that is the beauty of this exercise, is that when you force yourself to get out of your mental paths that you use and your muscle memory that you use when you improvise, we tend to see a lot of growth. You know, it's like I always say, if you place restrictions on yourself, you actually end up freeing yourself in the end, because you just have to think a lot harder and you have to be a lot more cognizant of exactly what you're doing, which is a huge part of practicing. If we always go on autopilot when we're improvising and when we're practicing, we will always sound the same. We'll never grow out of our habits. And I can tell you 100% that one of my habits is using the full range of my saxophone. And to confine myself to 1 octave of that 2.5 octave range is really, really difficult. And my teacher, back when I was in early college years, forced me to do this for a couple of months on a bunch of different jazz standards. And I can say that it was one of the most valuable experiences that that teacher ever taught me, because it really opened my eyes to my tendencies and what I tend to do when I'm not thinking about it. So this is going to be great. What I've done is I've written an etude that stays between 2 C's, an octave apart. So a middle C and the C above that. And I haven't gone outside of that range whatsoever in this etude that I've written for you. And the thing about it is you can play a lot of really, really cool stuff, obviously, within an octave, but you really have to, again, you've got to think about it. And you've got to really plan your lines carefully, whereas you might have continued going in one direction when you don't have that octave restriction. All of a sudden now you've got to turn around and come back in the other direction because you've run out of notes. You've run out of notes to use before you cross that octave threshold. So I want you to study this etude, figure out how I kind of compose these lines without ever leaving the range of an octave. And then I want you to put on a play along really, really slowly for Solar. And I want you to try this improvising. Play the etude first and then try it yourself. Now, this has the potential to be one of the most frustrating things that you've done in a long time, if not the most frustrating thing you've ever done. But I really want you to fight through that. I want you to fight through to the other side and open up your mind to these new possibilities of staying within that one octave. Okay? So I'm going to play the etude for you here at the end of the episode. Make sure if you have any questions, you hit me on the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Community Facebook group. That is where all those questions get answered, and we have a lot of cool discussions over there. Okay? So check out this etude, dig it, and I hope you all have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week with another brand new episode. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you.